So welcome everyone to our Ada Lovelace Day. Now, just some housekeeping. We have tea and coffee at the back, so if anyone wants to go and grab a tea or coffee now, you're quite welcome. Down the corridor on the right, there are the restrooms. So I think that's about all all the housekeeping. So welcome to our Ada Lovelace celebration. Now, this is the third Ada Lovelace Day that we've had. Ada Lovelace Day is an international celebration of the achievements of women in STEM, and it's held annually, traditionally on the second Tuesday of October. So we're right at the right date. So it honours Ada Lovelace, who is considered to be the first computer programmer, for her work on Charles Babbage's analytical engine in the 1840s. So the day aims to raise the profile of women in STEM and encourage more girls to pursue STEM careers. So look, I'll hand over to our Dean now, who will open Ada Lovelace Day.
Thank you, Judy. I think my notes say similar things, but anyway, I'd like to, good morning, everyone. I'm Anne Nicholson. I'm a Professor of Computer Science and AI, and I'm currently the Dean of the Faculty of IT. Before I start, I'd like to acknowledge that we're meeting here today on the lands of the Wurundjeri and Boonwurrung people of the Eastern Kulin Nations, who are the traditional owners and custodians of these unceded lands. I'd like to pay my respect to the elders past and present, and also acknowledge Indigenous colleagues who are here with us today. Also, I'd like to acknowledge the elders of any nations that First Nations that people are joining and the elders of the lands that people are joining us from today, if they're not Boonwurrung or Wurundjeri, which of course is pretty much covering most of Melbourne, but people could be joining from anywhere, and I can't see any of you, but I'm assuming you can see me. So it is good for us to take a moment and think about people who came before us and helped develop opportunities and change the world and give us the world we're in now. So as Judy said, Ada Lovelace Day is celebrated every October. Ada Lovelace was quite interesting person. She was educated and, taught mathematics and so on, obviously was very bright, but she was in a wealthy family. Her father was Lord Byron. Can't remember who her mother was, which is not good. But I think her parents separated, but she had tutors and was particularly gifted in mathematics. And she had lots of interesting conversations with people who were, in that sort of circle. So she knew Charles Babbage, who was the person who designed that analytic engine. And so I guess she was in that sort of group of people that were talking about these ideas and probably helped Babbage form his design. And then she also was talking with him and came up with ideas about how you would use such an analytical engine to do computations, like what you would do it for, and wrote sort of mathematical notes that really were like instructions for running this machine. And what I should say is, this was in the 19th century. There was no computers, electricity, digital, but it was around a mechanical engine that, with certain ways of doing things, could do computations. So it was those instructions that she wrote down, which I actually had a look at, very odd notation and so on, not we would directly recognise as programming, but instructions for a computer is what programming's about, which is why she's credited as the world's first computer programmer. And it's quite interesting, and I've heard Graham Farr give interesting talks about this as well, is that when computers first came, actually it was women. In fact, before there was even computers, but women were doing computational work on things like calculations. It wasn't considered something that was for men to do. So sort of smart women that were good at maths and so on did that. And then when computers first came along, there wasn't the assumption that it was a male thing. It wasn't like engineering or ditch digging or whatever else that men were dominating in. And quite interesting then, at some point, women sort of stopped being as involved in computers, and the numbers went down and they've only really, since I started as undergraduate in the 80s, and probably about 10% of my class in first year computer science was women, and in some of our areas we're still not really there yet. I have got in my notes just to talk about how do we all get into these areas? Usually there's some combination of personal interest, ability, but an environment, access to education, possibly a family environment or someone you know in your family or extended circle who can encourage you, or these days be a role model. I mean, obviously Ada Lovelace didn't have a role model. And so I had that combination of things, growing up in Australia, free education, educated parents, a father who genuinely expected his smart daughters to do things with their life, and so on. So I think, reflecting on that when we have this day, we've all make a journey, or for the men here, thank you for attending also, would have, women in your lives or students or things, and everyone has their individual journey, and it's good to reflect on that and what we can do. So, I've also got in my notes, we want to recognise pioneering women like Ada Lovelace. I guess I'm also someone who at some point did and do call myself a feminist. And so things where role models of women who led the way in STEM, they're also building on the waves of feminism across society around legal rights, the right to vote, and then other cultural changes about norms about whether women even work outside of the home, and so on. So I'd like to sort of acknowledge not just the leaders in STEM or women like Ada Lovelace, but those feminists who really changed at least our society, and also want to acknowledge that there is many areas of the world now where women still don't have those economic rights or economic opportunities, the legal rights, or the cultural environment where they can chase their dreams and fulfill their talents and ambitions. So, there's still a way to go in the world, but I feel that we're really fortunate here in Australia. We've got a little bit of a theme today. We're going to be talking in a panel later about AI in particular. So, the pace at which AI has accelerated both the capabilities of these modern AI tools and how quickly they're being adopted into all areas of how we teach, work, and so on, and just, all sorts of devices and digital things. It's really actually, even for someone like me who's been in AI for so many years, it's kind of surprising and a little bit daunting and a little bit scary. Okay, so we'll be talking about later, what might this mean for women in particular as these changes are happening, opportunities and so on. And I've just got a few figures. Women now make up 30% of Australia's ICT workforce, only 30% still, well under half. What will the technological shifts that are happening now around AI, how will they shape that future of work? I mean, the future of work is going to be changed for everyone. Will there be particular aspects for women? So we'll be talking about that. Also just got a few numbers for the faculty. In our professional staff, we have more than 50% women, but in our academic staff, we've got different categories of academic staff. So for teaching and research and practice, we've got just 27.5% women, but in our education-focused roles, we've got 77%. So it's quite gendered. In our continuing divine period academic, our assistant lecturers, 33% women. So don't really quite know where that is. In our PhD teaching fellows, 47%, and just under 40% in our research fellows. So quite different in these different categories. We're possibly reflecting things about career trajectories and so on. And in our undergraduate, the numbers are a little bit distorted, I think. I've got 26% in undergraduate, but that's for the degrees we manage. Some of our double degrees with business and arts we don't manage, so I think they have a higher proportion of women. In our postgraduate, just under 30%, and in our graduate research, just under 40%, so more as we go up. which I guess is good in some ways, but kind of a little bit odd that the pipeline below that is not looking better. And yeah, differences between, again, I think still gendered. The Master of AI and Master of Cybersecurity, only just over 20% women. They're highly technical. And the Masters of Business Information Systems, 46% women. So it's really hard to tease those out. We're not going to get into that now, but there are these differences even in our student cohort and our staffing around the gender breakdown. So we're not at some stage where everything is equal, where it's, you know, this gender balance and everything. And depending on whether we feel that there's barriers to women fulfilling their ambitions and their talents, if women might be choosing to do different things with their ambition, you know, their talents, that's a different matter. And that's what we might be seeing reflected in some of those differences in areas, but maybe not. Okay. That was just my reflection. Sorry, Judy, I went on a bit too long, but I will now hand back to Judy to take over are you doing the MC role? Am I supposed to? Okay, all right. So anyway, welcome everyone. And the only other thing, I'm still in various things, people introduce me as the first dean of the women dean as the Faculty of IT. We will really know when we've got there, when we stop being introduced as the first woman anything. Okay, that's what I hope in the future. Thank you.
So thanks very much, Anne. That was great. That really gives a good overview of what's happening and everything that we're thinking about, talking about today. Okay, so now we've got, that's my phone. Yes, yeah, so no, I saw that, but I thought you'd realise it. So okay. Okay, now we've got a short quiz now, which is looking at testing your knowledge of women in IT, some women from history or events from history. Please scan to join the quiz. And I'll invite Barbara up, Barbara Ainsworth. Now, Barbara Ainsworth, just to introduce Barbara, because she'll be talking later on, so I may as well introduce her now. She's a curator of our Monash Museum of Computing History, and she's been looking after the collection since 2007. So she's got postgraduate qualifications in museum studies and public history, brings a lot of experience to this role. And she researches the history of Australian computing with a focus on Monash University. So she's written a number of papers about different people in our faculty, different artefacts. She works with the ICT Heritage Project with the Piercy Foundation. So I'd like to introduce Barbara. And Barbara's designed these questions, so I thought we should acknowledge her now. Okay, so question 1. When was the term artificial intelligence first used? So now we've got experts in the room, so I trust Barbara, she knows it. Yeah. So how long do we have for these questions? 10, 15 seconds. Okay. So we must be there. Okay. How did people go? Do we get a little 62%? Ah, okay. Not bad. That's not bad. So Barbara's got some background on this. So yeah.
In 1950, in 1950, Alan Turing posed the question, can machines think, in his paper, Computing Machinery and Intelligence. But the actual wording, artificial intelligence, was started in 1956 by John McCarthy and Marvin Minsky, who had the Dartmouth Summer School project on artificial intelligence. And they introduced that term at that time, although, of course, you know, a lot of thought had already gone into these ideas. Now, they had about 20 people over 6 weeks at this summer school. There were no women invited to the summer school. So,
okay, thank you. So next question. Next question. Yeah. Okay. There's big gaps here in the dates.
Okay. 1966. It wasn't called a chatbot, but it did have the functions of a chatbot, and it was developed with the name Eliza, which was the first chatbot produced, although the terminology chatbot wasn't actually introduced until 1994. So that's it. But it was called Eliza because they taught it to speak, in a sense, respond. And that was like in My Fair Lady and the character Eliza. The original code has been found for this, and they have recreated it. And next month in November, the National Communications Museum will be able to show you how that was working with their new exhibition, Friends. So,
Okay. Next question. It's up there. Yep. Oh, really? Okay. Right. Okay. Thank you. Right.
well,
There was a big gap between the 66 and 92. Was a yeah. Okay. Tricky. Okay. 1990. So what percent got that?
26%.
26%. Class is not doing so well. Class. Right. Okay.
So this is Cynthia Braziel, who developed her social robot Kismet in the 1990s, and she's currently Dean of Digital Learning at MIT. So it's a very nice robot.
Have a guess. Okay. Right. 2008.
50% said 2013.
Right.
32% said 2008.
Right. Okay.
Yeah, Penny's.
How
Yeah.
are people tracking?
Yeah, that's that was Professor Penny Sackett, who was a physicist and an astronomer. And a bit later, Dr. Kathy Foley was from the CSIRO, was there in 2021 to 2024. And of course, Alan Finkel, previously Chancellor of Monash, was there in 2016 to 2020.
Okay. The last question.
Oh, you should know this answer. We've been listening to Anne's.
Yes, there we go. Yeah. No, maybe adjust, not quite.
It's surveyed by Microsoft.
Well, you have to guess what Microsoft would say.
And LinkedIn.
62% got that.
Oh, wow. Okay. Right. So how did people go? Did anyone get them all right? A bit tricky. Okay. All right. All right. Okay. All right. Well, I'm pleased. I'm glad. Okay. Well, there were no marks for that. No marks. No, it doesn't contribute to your final results. So don't worry. Okay. So now I would like to hand over to Barbara, who's going to talk about a really famous woman in computing, Grace Hopper. So people know the name Grace Hopper. I think they know the name, but Barbara's going to tell us a little bit about Grace.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Okay. Ada Lovelace Day celebrates the women of, in STEM and their achievements in the past, the present and the future. And so Ada Lovelace was working in the 1840s, but it wasn't really for 100 years that women were able to start participating in digital computing. And I'm going to talk today about Dr. Grace Hopper, who started her career in computing in the US in the 1940s. And she continued in various roles for the next 40 years, but she had a major impact on programming. Grace Brewster Murray was born in New York in 1906, and she had studied mathematics at Vassar and then did her master's and PhD at Yale. She then started teaching at Vassar in 1931. In 1930, she married Vincent Hopper, an English professor. They were later divorced in 1945, but she retained using his surname. During World War II, Dr. Hopper wished to help with the war effort and applied to the US Navy Reserve for a position in the section known as WAVES, which was an acronym for Women Accepted for Voluntary Emergency Service. And this was the beginning of her career in the Navy. And despite her small height, and she didn't meet the weight limit, in 1943, she was accepted and went to work for a secret group called the Bureau of Ships Computation Project, which worked on the electromechanical computer Mark I at Harvard. She was third in command and was one of the 4 original programmers. They did calculations for military requirements. And this was the first experience Grace has had in computer programming. She continued in that position, but she's also associated with a computer legend about the first computer bug. The term bug was already in use and referred to a glitch, but she was working in 1947 on the Mark II at Harvard and encountered a hardware problem. Investigating, she found a moth stuck in a relay, and this was causing a short. And she then recorded the fix in the logbook and wrote, "The first actual case of bug being found." So this is actually preserved in the Smithsonian. In 1949, Grace left the Harvard computation to work in a new computer called UNIVAC with Prosper Eckert and Howard Morchley. They designed the computer ENIAC at the University of Pennsylvania, and they left to set up their own business. And Grace had a very long career with UNIVAC and developed her idea that programs should be written in a language-based format rather than machine code. In 1957, she created Flowmatic, the first English language data processing compiler. The US Pentagon was also interested in creating a common programming language, and in 1959 formed a committee on data systems languages with a group of programmers and representatives from large computer companies. Grace was the technical advisor on the committee. This group considered available programs, announced the development of COBOL, Common Business Oriented Language, and it was partly based on Grace's programming language, Flowmatic. While still with UNIVAC, Grace Hopper continued her work with the US Navy. Between 1967 to 1977, she was the director of the Navy Programming Languages Group in the Navy's Office of Information Systems Planning. Grace divided much of her career between working with UNIVAC and her duties with the US Navy Reserve. But I found that she actually made 2 visits to Australia. In 1970, she came for 1 week and she gave lectures to meetings of the Australian Computer Society in Sydney, Canberra and Melbourne. She often appeared in her military uniform, but with her out as a Navy member of the Navy. She visited again in 1972 to speak at the 5th Australian Computer Conference in Brisbane in May. And she was the keynote speaker, and her speech was Programming Languages, Present Actions in the Light of Future Requirements. Thinking of the theme today on AI, I was interested to know if Grace was aware of AI, and she clearly was from a very early stage. Looking at the first conference on artificial intelligence held in 1958 in England, she spoke at the second session, but the first session with the founders of the field of artificial intelligence, Marvin Minsky and John McCarthy, as well as being chaired by W.S. McCulloch. Grace Hopper's major contribution to computer software development was widely recognised. She retired from the US Navy Reserve with the rank of Rear Admiral in 1986, and she continued to teach throughout her career and received numerous academic awards and prizes, including 40 honorary degrees. She died in 1992 and was buried at Arlington Cemetery with full military honours. Looking at the title of her papers, she always focused on developing programming for the future, and I think she would have enjoyed today's next discussion. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Barbara. Barbara's done a lot of research in different people, and she has a few papers written on her work. So yeah, over the years. So great. Thank you. So now we have our panel, and I'd like to invite our panel members to come and sit out the front, please. And the theme of today is AI and the future of work for women. So we've got a really great panel, I think, here to discuss this. Now, just to set the scene, and Anne has mentioned this already, that according to the ACS, women currently represent about 30% of the workforce in Australia. Recent gender pay gap that they talked about also revealed a stark difference in the difference in the pay that women get, the average pay that women get and men get. So partly due to lack of gender diversity when it comes to senior positions, they say. So another report I read in just recently, the 2025 Lovelace report, The Value of Keeping Women in Tech, they say only about 20% of tech workers in the UK are women. But more worrying is the rate at which women leaving the ICT sector was double that of men. So just to put this into context, this is why it's so important to keep talking about women in the workforce. So the theme of today, AI and the future of work for women. So AI is rapidly reshaping and disrupting industry, education, our lives. But what does this mean for women in the workplace? So that's a starting point. Now, I'd like to introduce our panel members. I'll start with, I won't go in order, I'll start with order of place. I'll start with our first one, Carolyn Houston. Would you like to just, that's right, Carolyn Houston. So that's enough. So Carolyn is a principal research consultant at CSIRO, the Data 61, and she has a background in statistics and applies statistical thinking to solving real world problems. So she's led lots of projects, multiple projects related recently to bushfire resilience planning, particularly in the domain of improving electrical network safety. So her work in this area has led to deep expertise in understanding the factors that cause bushfires, prevent or slow bushfires, and understanding and reporting on different aspects of bushfire consequence. So that's just one thing. I know Carolyn's done other things that she'll talk about. So our next person is Bhagya Mahishi, who is a final year PhD candidate in our faculty, in the Faculty of IT. So she brings a strong interdisciplinary background spanning engineering, international development and education. So her research focuses on improving dialogic feedback processes in higher education through the lens of learning analytics. So she's worked with national, international organisations such as UNESCAP, is that how we pronounce it? And UNDP, and previously has held academic roles. Okay, and then we have Professor Monica Whitty. So Monica is a leading expert in human factors in cybersecurity, which combines her expertise in psychology and technology. So she's advised the World Economic Forum Cybersecurity Centre and served on its Cybersecurity Global Futures Committee. So her work has significantly shaped global cybersecurity policy and research, influencing strategies in the UK and Australia to prevent cyber fraud, detect insider threats and combat disinformation. So thank you. So last in our panel is, but not least, so Professor Anne Nicholson. So Anne is a globally recognised specialist in Bayesian networks. So her research focuses on translational impact and social good with cross-disciplinary collaborations in epidemiology, medicine, education, science and meteorology, apparently. Okay, so she has many publications, including co-authored book on a text, which is a textbook on Bayesian artificial intelligence. So her research has resulted in 2 startup companies for technology transfer of Bayesian AI. So she's our first woman appointed to the role, I'll mention this again, the Dean of the Faculty of IT. And she also champions many initiatives to bring more girls and women into study IT and new careers in IT. Okay, so that's our panel. So I thought we'd start off with a question for the panel members. I'll ask each person the same question and ask them to respond. So asking you, I'll sit down here now. I can sit down here. Yeah. Okay. So can you share how AI first entered your work and perhaps how it has shaped your career? So where should we start? Who wants to start?
Sure.
Start. That's fine.
Right,
Yeah.
that's very kind. How did AI, I think you're quite right. I've identified as a statistician for a very long time in my heart of hearts. And my first real, thinking about AI is John Whittle came across from Monash, and he was very AI focused. And suddenly I had to think about, well, how does my work fit in with an AI paradigm, or what of my work meets this definition of AI? And I think there was opportunity in that because I'm a very good data scientist. I've thought about data cycles, I'm good at that. But what AI allowed me to do is think about, what's that whole cycle of, not just the data and the algorithm, which was kind of my comfort zone, but to start to stretch things. And then you deploy that in the real world. And then you have to make updates to that. So you don't just develop your algorithm and then drop it and stop thinking about the data that's feeding into it to make sure that it's still fit for purpose. So I think what it really, thinking about my work in AI has given it that context of, these algorithms are going to go out in the world. They are going to be in systems. Those systems are going to be maintained and go forward in time. And I now feel a responsibility for making sure that that is done in ethical and correct ways, not just at that preliminary, I've got a nice algorithm phase, but all the way through that life cycle.
Okay, Baggy, would you like to? Yeah.
Yes. So I first learned about AI as like making data intelligent. That's when I was doing my master's. That time when we were taught semantic web concepts, they said like AI is in 2 forms. One is robotics, the other way is that you make the web more intelligent. So since then, I just focus on like how to make more intelligent web applications. I was kind of possessed about it, like about that. And then I focused on my master's thesis to how to make the web metadata more consistent. So then they have that interoperability between machines, so we can have more statistical data communicating to each other. So that's what I was working on. So few years back, I moved to UN and then working with like career statisticians. Within them, big data was considered that time as dirty data because they don't know where the data comes from, where they can't validate it, they can't identify it as like a proper source. So it was a big black box. So after that, I did a bit of like self-exploration in terms of learning how about the machine learning works. I still learning about that. I call myself an amateur in terms of like machine learning stuff. But then I started properly learning about AI when I started my PhD. So especially when the Gen AI hype came, and that's when was like, okay, this is something out there, how this works, like how LLM works. And currently I feel like I'm using Gen AI or like especially AI work as an assistive tool. I don't call it like superior than human. I still believe the human brain is superior than AI. So I feel like the way AI is shaping me is more providing editorial support. So it just like check your grammar, maybe give better wordings and that stuff. And also when it goes to programming, you can start with like a bit of a scaffolding. But even for the scaffolding, you really need to know what it is giving, whether it's accurate or not. And I think we can also use analytical purposes, AI. And lastly, if you really want to feel better, I think you can use the hallucination. It comes from Gen AI, like make me feel better. They'll basically make you feel better. Yeah, that's where things are with me, AI at the moment.
Thank you. Yeah, I guess I've had a bit of a journey with AI, but in a different way. So my background is psychology. I did a Bachelor of Science degree, so I did a mathematics and statistics and all that with it as well. But I'm trying to reach back, I guess, in the early 2000s when I was teaching my students about ELIZA in psychology and experiencing that and talking about, is it ethical? Would this be helpful? And now hearing it's in a museum makes me feel quite old. The other instances that were big kind of points for me, I think, is when working with looking at cyber scams in about 2007, law enforcement were coming to me saying, how is it that people are talking to someone on a video and it looks like the person they think they're talking to when it can't be, because it should be different because they're a criminal in Nigeria or whatever. Why is this happening? So we had to go to computer scientists and they said, well, there's this deep fake thing. And of course, we didn't hear about this in popular talk and media until much later on. And that was really interesting. The criminals grab onto this technology and develop it and share it a whole lot quicker than we do. And then I guess moving on, looking at AI as a tool, like the others have talked about in research, looking at that, how that helps my statistics, how it helps looking at natural language processing and making that even better in our analysis. So those are probably the key points in my life.
Yeah, so I did a science degree also, but with a computer science major along with maths and physics. And in third year, there was an artificial intelligence elective in 1985. And in those days, it meant sort of search, A star for those who know, predicate calculus, and that was in the heyday of sort of logic programming. So that's where people thought that Prolog and that class of languages would be the way to program an artificial intelligence. So that was my initial exposure. When I did my honours project, I ended up doing looking at an interpreter for a parallel logic programming language called guarded horn clauses. Doesn't sound like AI, but the Japanese were thinking it was going to be the way to do AI, and they had a 5-year program that failed and led to the second AI winter or something. Anyway, first AI winter, not sure. Anyway, there's been a lot of AI winters. I wanted to go on and do postgrad study. I started a master's, which I could have converted to a PhD. I started it at Melbourne Uni, and I was interested in, because I'd been doing certain things, but I was interested in natural language. Some people might not know this. So I did my master's on how you could do parallel parsing of natural language using these parallel logic programming languages. Anyway, and then I went off to the UK, ended up in the robotics research group in Oxford, where they mostly did computer vision, but I didn't do computer vision. I ended up looking at how you can do kind of qualitative monitoring of robots, and came across these Bayesian approaches and really early days of BaseNets. So quite interesting sort of technical background. So I guess that what I wanted to say was that I liked programming and felt good about being a computer scientist, but it was really exciting to think about the future of computers being smarter, intelligent, whatever it might mean. So I did want to work in that area. And then over the years, you know, people come up with different kinds of models, and I did user modeling and this and that and the other. So I never did neural networks. And I think there's a good quote in Stuart Russell's AI textbook, which is something like neural networks are the second best way of doing nearly everything, and genetic algorithms are the third, or something. So I didn't do genetic algorithms or neural networks because they weren't supposedly the best way of doing anything. And that's been really proved wrong, because now they're pretty good at lots of things, the deep neural networks. How has it shaped my career? Well, my career has been as an AI researcher. I have to admit that the last few years I feel like a real laggard in that I write my own emails still, and I have played around with ChatGPT because I feel like I should understand about prompts and hallucinations, but I've not incorporated it in doing anything because I find that I shape my thinking by writing my own talks and doing my own slides, and I don't know how to outsource some of that to the tool and then incorporate it back. So, and I'm going to retire, so I don't have to worry about that. And I decided that that's for the next generation about how to incorporate AI either into their actual research or into just their work as a professional. So I'm going to be interested to see how you guys all go.
It's a bit of a nightmare at the moment.
Yeah, and I haven't been teaching.
It's unbelievable the code that students write now. How
What they
how
write?
bad what they write.
Oh, all the
Well, what they submit. Submit. Obviously, it's nothing like what we've taught. So it's really scary because they get just falling into bad habits before we realise that they've got them. Okay, so you've got a history here. You've sort of come into the area in different ways. So thinking about someone starting out today, for women working in AI, what do you think would be the most what valuable technical and professional skills starting off working in the AI and industry? So Carolyn is looking like you're going to. Oh, well, okay.
I'll take
Buggy,
one.
okay.
Yeah. So thinking about that, the technical skills, I would break it into 3 parts. So it's the first one, it's more as a single user. So if you are using AI for your work, so you need to know like how to prompt, as in like basically you need to know what you want to get out of the AI. So you need to prompt properly, and also you need to have a proper knowledge to check whether that output is correct. So people in, I guess, our generation and older than us, we have been doing things manually. So when something came out of Gen AI, we know how to check it. We know when it is actually giving bad work. But in people who are in the new generation, they are not used to it. So I guess we need to teach it in a way how actually you can check that. The second category, I think, in terms of technical skills is the product development. So how you can actually incorporate AI into your like a product or like a software that you are developing in. So you need to know about the software development life cycle, where in that cycle or like in your design where the AI fits in terms of what an API is, different integration mechanisms, so all sort of things you need to know how to incorporate AI into your tool design, that sort of thing. Lastly is the knowledge creation of AI. So it's basically you are going on a path of creating AI by yourself. So starting off with maths, optimization techniques, probability, statistics, those are the basics of machine learning. And then building on like what sort of algorithms out there, like what you can use, and going back to what services available for you to test out what you have designed, like cloud services, API integration, and all those sort of things. So those are the things that I believe as technical skills somebody is coming into the field that needs to look into. In terms of professional skills, I think we need to rethink the professional skills, what professional skills are in the age of AI. The reason being, I teach IT professional practice, And one of the skills that we teach for students is research skills. So back in days, the scholars go to a library, they look into the hard copies books, gather the knowledge, comprehend it, and produce knowledge. And then when Google came in, we can find things through Google, but still the scholars do the hard work of like comprehending that knowledge and producing it. But now with AI, like Scopus AI, you just go there, give the keywords, it will write like few paragraphs for you, including references. So the summarization is done for you. So where the research skill stands in, I feel like the professional skill now becomes the knowledge production, not finding the papers, not comprehending it, but building on that and produce the new knowledge. Similarly, I think it goes for the communication part as well. So with LLM in place, there are good sentence structures coming in, good vocabulary coming in. So it's easier to write a speech, write a report, or produce a PowerPoint presentation within seconds. But then the professional skills comes on the delivery part. So having said that, I feel like we are in a time that we need to redefine what we meant by professional skills. That's my take on it.
I guess the way I think about it's probably different to others because I don't come from the computing science direct discipline. So my learnings is I was very good at mathematics and all those other things, hard skills, physics, etc. But I found that wasn't for me being a woman really, because I sat in lecture theatres with a whole lot of smelly men that didn't look very nice, I thought. And I thought, that's not for me. So I learnt my maths by myself and did well. So, but I guess what I'm thinking is there's two things for women. There's one, relevance, and the other's empowerment or self-efficacy. So in the workplace, it has to have, I think at least from my perspective, relevance to what is interesting for women. And that may not always be, I don't believe in an essentialist paradigm, but there still are things that we're gendered and we're socialized to be more interested in. So I moved it into psychology because I like helping people and I like interacting with people. So I think it has to be couched in terms about what is it that is interesting for you. And then rather than AI, women, you all do AI. So how might that be interesting in your field of interest? But also self-efficacy. Whenever technology is mentioned for women, they think, oh, I don't know that stuff. So we've just been fresh off the computer this morning, working with Amin, looking at cryptocurrency cyber scams. And we've been looking at just some simple stuff at the moment, looking at gender and who has confidence in the cryptocurrency market and who invests. Guess what? It's men. They have more confidence. So even though women often, have access to the funds and everything else, it's still men doing that. So as technology keeps building on, we need to bring that women into the journey of self-efficacy. So relevance and self-efficacy. And I think that's how we need to look at it in the workplace. That'll be me.
I'm trying to think of a sort of a slightly different take because I agree with some of those things. When I look at what women should be thinking about with new technologies or how they might want to incorporate it into their own work or their career, I do feel sometimes that women, in some ways it's good that it's more acceptable for women to sort of just follow what they want and not worry about how much they're going to get paid. Women who want to go into early childhood care or into teaching, and the areas that women go into en masse, even if they don't start off that way, end up being lower paid and lower status. Okay, so I guess I try and, when I've mentored people, encourage them to look at what they want to do and what they find interesting, but to look at the world in a slightly, not cynical way, but in a more strategic way to think about how you can do those and still be successful and well paid and have that economic independence and so on. And, work out a way to use the technology to be able to work part-time if you want to actually see your children when they're young and all of these sort of things. So I would just encourage the women who are looking and thinking about AI to think about, what do you want to do and where do you want to go, and to do that practicalities of how might you want to juggle work and family and be economically independent and be sort of successful if that's what you want. And sometimes you have to do a few things along the way. You have to sort of hold your nose a little bit, not necessarily because you're sitting in a room with smelly men, but you might have to do some things that are more boring or a little bit more tedious, because there's no jobs or career paths that are perfect. I mean, who likes marking the 100th exam? No one. You've seen all the interesting answers by 20. Anyway, so maybe we'll use AI to do more of this marking and just validate their things and stop having to do tedious marking, which women end up doing more of because they end up doing more of the grunge teaching. Anyway, did I say I'm being recorded, am I? So I really do think that I want women to, look at the opportunities but to be really aware of the world, because sometimes, we end up making choices and then down the track, it's a bit harder to come back from it. And we also know that, women are retiring right now with less economic security and so on. And that shouldn't be the case now, and it certainly shouldn't be the case in 30 or 40 years, regardless of what AI does, on economies, and, could be good, could be bad, but we don't want women to be worse off.
That's a tough act to follow, all of these women. Feeling imposter syndrome here. No, I really think there's some important themes that I just want to emphasize as a last comment. We've talked a lot about, women sometimes, do what they want. And I wouldn't necessarily say it's do what they want. I've worked a lot in how do you hire women into tech areas, and it's all about values alignment, right? So as a woman, know where your values alignment is. And then let's be smart, like you were saying, Anne, which is to say, and where can you make money with that values alignment, right? I work a lot with some of the award submissions that we do for women in AI at CSIRO, and we've had people coming from design backgrounds win, like literally artists. We've had people coming from film backgrounds win in those spaces. They know what they're good at, and they're looking at how can I use that in a technology space. But I will say for the really technical side of it, where we still have an underrepresentation of women, it is exactly like you've said, we need to have a bit of those compute skills. We need to have those math and logic skills. They're really, really important. So if you've got a values alignment and you can see a vision how you can improve AI, you might have to hold your nose and get through that class so that you can enable that vision. And again, if part of that is having economic independence, achieve that.
So thinking about women, what unique perspectives or contributions do you think that they can bring to the AI technology field, if any?
Yeah, I guess that's a nice segue from what we were talking about before. And I guess for me, like the holding your nose, I didn't need to, because I incorporated it into psychology, and psychologists, by the way, get paid a lot of money. So, but I think I'm kind of talking about what you're saying is that it's your interest, but how do you bring that in? So rather than just go, oh, all right, I'm an artist, I'll just draw. How might I bring in technology to enable that? So if I'm creative, how might I use this? And I guess that's where the point of the self-efficacy comes in. But if we don't talk about it in other disciplines besides here, people aren't going to be understanding it and interested in it. So right here in the Faculty of IT, we all get AI and we're less intimidated by it because we can see how it works. But you bring that into other disciplines and you say the word AI, they're like, oh, that's not me. I don't understand that. I'm not interested in that. That doesn't relate to me. So I think that's where we need to be having those conversations, so that in all the disciplines, highly paid, lowly paid, whatever, we get that in there, that people really get it. Like law, for instance, that's a topic that is really important. It's making important decisions that with algorithms that are very gendered and not helpful. And so those conversations really, really need to happen. But we need to help others, and because women aren't always in this discipline, to help them understand that we need to have those conversations beyond here, I think.
Yeah. So building on what Rebecca said, there's a new buzzword out there called expert generalists. So there's a new profession called expert generalists. Basically, those are people who have like a deep knowledge on one topic and like with a broader, but a shallow knowledge on many areas. So they're like, I feel like women kind of have that factory default setting in them with the curiosity, collaborativeness, and then like we are very good at like customer focused roles and also favor in fundamental knowledge. When I say like factory default, is like I'm not an anthropologist, but I think from very prehistoric era when men was focusing on going hunting and like finding food, women were staying at home, taking care of kids, managing households, basically multitasking, and they were kind of connecting dots and having that big picture. And I feel like as women, most of them, they don't leverage that. I think whoever, they have that ability to see the big picture, and then if they can bring that, I feel like women can actually lead this expert generalist part, basically abstracting what is out there and like developing new concepts. That's, I think, where the women can bring value into AI.
Yeah, okay. I'm going to say a slightly different question here because I'm a woman in AI, and I'll say, what is the value that I'm bringing, and what do I think other women can do as well, or other? And I don't want to just limit this to women. I want to talk about people who have faced structural and social challenges in achieving their dreams, right? And that can be because you come from a diverse background. It can be things that have happened in your life, but I have a cheat sheet of questions that I take to meetings, especially when we're forming things like project teams, and I ask the question like, I'm working with energy companies right now, and they're really concerned about understanding how different demographics are approaching transition. And I'm in a room, and it's like 8 white men, and it's 2 white women, and they're talking about a multicultural community that they're trying to understand. And I say, is there anybody in your team that looks like the community that you're trying to understand? Is there a way that we can make sure we have people from those communities or who look like those communities on their team? Because as much as I'm a woman and I have faced challenges because of that, I'm still pretty privileged, right? So I now have the privilege of attending these meetings as one of the 2 women and asking these pointy questions. And I think that when you've experienced those challenges or you've seen those challenges and you get it, that's a real opportunity. And we all know that when we get the diverse teams, they perform better, they bring better results. And I'll say the other thing that's really important in that space is we know that women are underrepresented in AI in so many ways, like starting from women who don't have access to the internet and computers, or I should say people who don't have access to internet and computers who are primarily women from lower socioeconomic countries, who don't speak English as a first language, and then travel that through. But we know there's skills gaps, Engineering Australia can't get enough people. I bet it's really hard to attract good quality candidates for post-secondary. Why would we give up on 50% of the workforce? Women can bring so much. And as women in the workforce, I can ask the questions that, hopefully influences hiring.
So I won't repeat some of those, although certainly the diversity of teams, including teams that are developing the technical AI and are in the businesses that are deciding that they want to have AI in products and to change the way their business or organisation works. You need to have diverse teams, including women in that. I just wanted to call out a little bit that our faculty has a whole department of human-centered computing, and we're very strong in human-computer interaction. And now people are realising that it's going to be human-AI interaction. I think for a whole variety of reasons, there's been probably slightly more than the average number of, might be one of these areas of tech that there's more women in than some others. And that's probably an opportunity for women who have those sort of range of interests and want to have the people side of things. In fact, just going back, I mean, it's always been a bit frustrating. Of course, there's always been the solo programmer with the Coke can next to him, and in recent years, you know, gaming on the weekends with their headset on and never meeting anyone in person. You know, that stereotype in the IT crowd, it really doesn't help us, because it's not the way that technology works in the workplace anyway, you know, where there's interdisciplinary teams, there's customers, there's sort of non-tech users that have to be supported and so on. So women in the tech industry often do quite well apart from structural barriers and glass ceilings and not being able to work 60-hour weeks and a whole lot of other stuff. But, you know, women in those sort of teams typically do well. And I think that the need to transition fast into a sort of an AI embedded world and have computer AI interaction being really looked at right now, not in 10 years' time when, you know, everything's gone completely the wrong way and we've realised we've put all this AI into the wild and not thought about the human AI interaction and whether it's really what we want. I think getting women into that now and getting diverse teams into that now is really, really important. So I think and there's some people whose role will be getting that deep learning module to be less hallucinatory or some other technical aspect, but for everyone should be looking in their teams at the ethics of AI and how it's going to be used for decision making, looking at bias, looking at all sorts of things, and not just say, oh, well, that's someone else's problem. Because it's actually that all the AI technologists and the business leaders and the education leaders and everything else, we cannot wait and think we'll deal with that side of AI in 10 years.
No.
Okay. Okay.
Well, good. Well, really, you've talked a little bit about this, but how can women shape the direction of AI to ensure it's more inclusive and representative? Or how can women or people shape?
Well, I'm a data
Direction.
scientist, so I'm going to
Yes,
say
yes.
data, right? You know, and back to the point I had in my last, you know, it's and your point, like when you worked with a stats group that said, oh, this big data, it's kind of garbage because we don't know where it's come from. But in a sense, we do know where it's come from because we know who's on the internet. We know who's posting on the internet. That's what we've trained our large language models on. And so that's who's represented in, and yes, I use it occasionally. It helps me strengthen my writing because I sound a lot more like a white man. Because white men post more. But there's something really important about including the knowledge from those other groups that are underrepresented in those spaces, which might mean we need to hunt or ask for them, whether that's books that are written in other languages that we can digitize, whether, you know, there's so much we can do to increase the diversity of the data that goes into those AI systems, even if we can't take a perfect statistical sample. So for me, I think that's one of the really, you know, women can progress that, you know, people who recognize that gap can progress that. And I think, you know, that's my message. If that's your takeaway, you know, just get better data in there, have more diverse teams. Women are good at doing that because we get promoted not when we promote ourselves, but when we promote others, right? So it's really easy. Let's promote people who don't have a voice. And that's actually going to be good for us because we're seen as the carers and, you know, let's take advantage of that.
I think so. With the AI development, people running after changing, like we see a new Gen AI or like a LLM model comes out every month or two. Like people are very obsessed with like how to improve the efficiency of all those things. But at the same time, I'm seeing like a big shout out to my fellow PhD colleagues out there. They are doing like empathy driven work. For example, what Pranita do with her body imaging research, which actually can inform the policy of like how social media can work on. And then Madhuka's research on like how to rework on the conversational agents to support this like cognitively disabled people. So likewise, there are like a lot of space for women to look into like empathy driven work. We all have that gift for caring. I think it's inherently feminist. I don't, so don't get me wrong. I'm not saying that men are not good at caring, but we as women have that somehow built into us. So I believe that the empathy sort of things, user experience, so multidisciplinary research, that's some area that women can actually step in. Maybe those are the areas people are less interested in as well, and then actually can do some impactful research. When it comes to research, I think in terms of making it more inclusive and representative, I think official data collections need to actually represent what the percentage of women are. Before this meeting, I just logged into the SDG Global Database to check whether there's official numbers out there in terms of researchers, because there's a specific indicator about researchers. So what I could find only for the region, and it's not aggregated by gender. Even not the leading countries are producing that number. So at highest level, we don't know the percentage of men or percentage of women or like any other gender, the representation of people are. So even within the AI research space, we don't know how to make room for people because we don't know who's missing there. So I think that is one area that needs to be improved to be more inclusive and representative. We need to open more doors for all genders, all people from different ethnicities, different backgrounds, and we can have that cross-functional, multicultural teams that bring in different perspectives and improve the work.
Thank you. I guess taking on from Anne's point at the beginning, saying, oh, wouldn't it be nice to live in a world where you weren't framed as a woman because you were doing your role as dean? But in saying that, if we want more women in AI, we need more women like Anne up front. We need more women in the classroom, and we need to teach it differently, as I'm sure Judith would be able to talk to, that it's not just, we need them to say, look, we know AI, we can teach AI, so you can be part of us, and different ranges of women as well, not just one stereotype woman that might fit into computer science that might represent a man or whatever, but looking at that range and diversity, but then how we teach it. So with mathematics, there's some research to say that women are more interested in mathematics when you give them interesting problems to solve. So it's about how you actually approach that. When I learnt mathematics, it was a man with a chalkboard, blah, 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 blah. And I thought, well, I could just read that in the book. So it has to be done differently. And that's all of our challenge, I think.
This is not my area of research, but even with the models that we've got or the current data we've got, it might take a time and additional data collection and other things to get an unbiased data set, but there's things you can do to look at that your current data sets are biased and then to sample differently from them, and over-represent say women in a data set where for some reason some medical trial only had 20%. Well, you rebalance it and you do really proactive technical things to do that. So I don't know if anyone here is in that area, but I do think that doing that right now and looking back and all the data we've got, even if we should be doing better in the future, is important from a technical sense. And I do think that in our teaching as well, look, we have double degree students and we talk about people needing to be more generalists, but we actually, like, our double degrees are just two single degrees pieced together. I don't think that's the best way of actually teaching people that can work across areas. And I do think that if we can get more young women in particular interested in some of the technical aspects, including of AI, through that interdisciplinary thing, I think it's partly about how we teach AI differently, but how we embed and connect AI and technology teaching with some other area that are interested in, like those artists who might want to get a living one day and try and work with, instead of AI taking all their jobs, by producing really crappy artwork or really good artwork. So I think we need to change how we think about producing specialists, generalists and graduates, and that might also help women in that space as well.
Okay. You,
I just answered.
yeah, you did.
No,
You,
no, for the next question.
oh, the next.
Oh, the next
You might want to answer it, but anyway. Okay, so thinking about the possible future developments in AI, what are you most excited or cautious or terrified about? Maybe.
All right, because I got a different angle to others. I'll talk about the terrified part from my area of research, and that is cyber scams. AI, the criminals have got the weapon and they're using it terribly well. The scripts that used to be written and for romance scams, for instance, now are perfected for different clusters of groups, and they don't. The leakage of West African language isn't in there anymore, and the videos and the pictures and the voice that they used to disguise. I remember working with law enforcement and talking to one male victim who thought he was talking to a woman, and we rang the person and they went, "Hello," and it was like, that's obviously a man, you know, and he couldn't tell. But now, of course, you don't need to do that. So that's my worry, is that criminal element is way ahead of us and we need to beat that.
I'll build on that. I'm more cautious about the future, talking from the point of learning part. I'm more worried about the metacognitive laziness that actually bringing into the students' learning. Unless our assessments are changed, people who are better at prompting to AI might win the game than the people who are actually not using. In the class that I'm teaching, what I'm seeing is most of the girls come to us and say, I'm not using AI. And then if we are grading for the quality of the submission, basically there's a high chance girls who are not using AI fall short during the assessments, because I think we are like risk aversion mode. Women always have that risk aversion mode. What if I use this? What if this happens? So that what if question actually pushed them not to use things, not to test things like men or boys do. So it might cause harm. And when I talk about metacognitive laziness, there's no gender for it. Everybody give AI to do the work for themselves. Then at a point I keep asking, do you even realize there's something inside this skull? It's so powerful, you can actually use it. I'm afraid that the speed that we are going in with it might actually harm the way people start learning. So I'm pretty worried about it.
Hey, I'm gonna talk about my worry first, but I'm gonna uplift us at the end with my hope, because there's a lot of I'm gonna go a bit bigger picture than the specifics of using things. My big fears right now are in where the push is coming for what's going to happen next in AI, and I am talking about the orange Cheeto across the pond. I'm talking about his cohort of people who make electric cars and deliver goods to your house really, really fast, and the fact that they've gone through, and I've got colleagues in America who 4.5 years into a 5-year program of funding have their funding pulled, which means they can't publish in an open source way, or they can't publish at all, and they can't finish their students who are in PhD programs. And they're working in areas like, how do we communicate science in an equitable way? How do we teach science in a way that attracts and retains diverse cohorts? And we're not going to know about that knowledge. It's gone, right? It's on their computer, but they're struggling to survive now. That really scares me that agenda is being set in that way. And I'm really proud that we still have a functioning liberal democracy in Australia, and we should use that as much as we can. On the positive side, despite the fact that there has been a cooling of how to do sort of responsible integration of AI, in the public company side, the banks know they need social license. The energy companies know they need social license. So whatever the orange Cheeto says, they're coming, you know, in the conversations I have with them or around, you know, I need to have social license with these cohorts because they're a business opportunity. So there are still these opportunities, and there is still pull lower down on the scale, not at this top government level, but lower down where people are dealing with people. There's still pull for that sort of responsible development. So I'm trying to focus on that as an optimistic place.
Oh, I'm trying to be optimistic. I'm cautious. Well, I'm concerned about the energy use of AI and that it's been so embedded. I mean, I don't even, you know, I use Google and I actually quite appreciate some of the Google AI, but I don't even have to ask for it. It just comes like that power is being generated. And so there's the power usage and energy usage of AI, you know, when we're struggling to make any inroads at all into moving to net zero, I think is really concerning. And I know that there's researchers, you know, looking at how you can train and use smaller models that are as good or good enough for whatever purpose and so on. So I think that there's reason to think that we, on the technical side, can do a lot better on that. I'm going to take a slightly bigger picture. I'm trying to be optimistic here, okay? So I don't know whether this is just fantasy land, but when I look at technology development and automation over the last few hundred years in particular, it's just been amazing. You know, we've got issues with population explosion and everything else in the world and overusing resources, but partly through technology and advances in agriculture, we've just changed the way that so many things are done, and so many jobs that people had at different times have gone away. Been doing family tree research the last few years, and my ancestors before they came to Australia were labourers. They were servants. They worked in Manchester cotton factories, you know, so these jobs have all been sort of automated out. And at the time, you know, people were smashing the factory looms and so on because of job losses. But over time, our economies and societies have seemed remarkably resilient and have generated different jobs, but at the same time uplifting standard of living. And the way in which we in the developed world live now is just like so far beyond what people would have imagined a few hundred years ago. So I think that digital and computation, you know, has had that positive impact about raising standards of living, along with the negative side it might be bringing. And I see AI as potentially contributing to that, because we're particularly worried now that white collar or jobs that people had to be smart to do or literate or whatever are now being replaced. But it's no real difference to people that used to earn their living sort of literally working on farms with a hoe before mechanisation or so on. So I think that if we can get the economic systems right, and we can manage the world's population and educate all the women and let us control our size of our families, maybe most people don't need to work at all to generate the food, the energy, the housing and whatever to live really fulfilling lives, where most people's lives are fulfilled by their human relationships, their families, possibly their hobbies, their passions. And for some of us, we have our passions in our work. But for the vast majority of the population, they work to earn a living. And if they didn't have to, they might be happier. So I try and think of AI like this, in that, yeah, maybe people who want to do some work or combine their work and their hobby will do that for a couple of days a week. And then the rest of us will just have good, healthy lives. We'll have time to exercise. Maybe we'll do housework for fun to stay fit instead of letting the robot do it. I don't know. I'm trying to finish on a positive note. But if we changed our economic system as well as developing the technology, and it wasn't just about letting more people be mega billionaires and more people being pushed into poverty, if we can fix up the economic side, it could be the next revolution to change the way that most people live and work a bit in the world. I'm trying to be positive here.
Great. I mean, I share Monica's terror with with all the scenarios that she was talking about, and also the caution. But the optimism is great. Yeah, we did have a we've had revolutions and people couldn't have imagined life after, and maybe it's going to be good, you know, maybe. I mean, at the moment, it's hard. It's hard teaching because you do have students who you see they're not thinking. You know, they have a tool. It's like surrogate learning happening. And yeah, we've got, you know, real fears about the criminals, you know, how it's going to be used. Because I know I first really knew my students were into this when I started getting emails that were 4 paragraphs long. So rather, hey, teacher, can I have an extension for my assignment? It's now, oh, I want to achieve the learning outcomes of this unit and the university. What is going on here? So, so quite, yeah, amusing things. Okay, so look, I was wondering if anybody else in the last few minutes has got any questions for our panel. Comments or questions or contributions or anything?
We have one online. Yep.
Oh, online, okay.
We've got one online that says, thank you for the interesting discussion. Do you think that graduates working in AI professional environments have the agency to contribute to innovation for their organizations?
So that's around the AI professionals and whether they can be contributing and at what level they're contributing. And I think that it's going to be hugely varying. We know that there's different organisations that sort of organise and value their workforce and, you know, get contributions and things at different levels depending on the company, the nature of what that company does, the particular style of the leadership and so on. So I think that in general in tech companies, the good tech companies definitely don't treat their lower level workers as sort of automatons just cranking out code because, one, they don't need to in the same way, and they also know that they can get value from workers that are engaged, that feel that they're valued, that feel that their ideas are being heard and so on. So good teams and organisational units would be doing that, and I think that would be true of AI as well. There's probably, from what I've heard just anecdotally, that there is an expectation that people will be upskilling in technology and, you know, with some have had more and less support on it, but incorporating AI into their work as AI or even any tech professionals. I think that the good organisations will be getting the early adopters to, you know, and recognising them and getting them to share their best practice and giving them, you know, internal roles that might have a sort of a peer education role and so on like that. And that will make people feel valued and also just this, I guess, this agency. I'm taking that to mean what the question was sort of intended about. But I suspect there's also companies that aren't doing that as well. And then at least when there's, you know, need for skills, people can go to other companies if they're not well valued. But there will be an interesting thing whether, you know, less people are needed in certain industries, and then the balance between the organisation and the employer shifts away, and there's less you know, opportunity for people to move companies if they're not being well treated or something. That balance between, yeah, now I'm sounding like a union person, but between the bosses and the workers, we don't really know if that will change. And we have seen that, you know, we've definitely heard that productivity of, say, software developers is increasing with the use of Gen AI, you know, in the same way that other automation tools, and that maybe there's less graduate jobs available in software development. It's a bit hard to see, a little bit soft on the employment front. And so that will change these dynamics as well. I mean, how many people get that first job, and then how easy it for them to build their career or move around? We don't really know yet. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm going to say you bang on. I actually saw a recent presentation by a demographer looking at, you know, Australian demographics and where the jobs were of the future and where there were gaps in the pipeline between, you know, baby boomers are retiring, And HR people complain about it, but people who are coming into the workforce can command a much different conversation than people who are hired in the 1980s could, regardless of the mindset of managers, right? Because they still need to hire people to fill those roles. And as a new graduate, if you've got the right skill set, if you know about AI, you can use it well, you can show that you're that thinking person that's going to contribute, you can command quite a bit in your negotiation at a job. So first of all, recognize your own value if you're a new graduate. Ask tough questions because you are a valuable commodity on the marketplace. If you're already hired, I suggest what I've done, get a list of 3 pointy questions that you annoy people with at meetings. Everybody gets invited to meetings, and in a job, you do get the chance to ask questions, and you might get a reputation for it, but sometimes, that means the issues are on the table and they're visible, and eventually they will get focused on, right? It can take time. But if you're wondering how to make an impact, sometimes it's slow, but just keep treading away at it and know your own value. Like you say, if people aren't creating an atmosphere for retention, you can go back out onto the marketplace and find a better offer.
I think I would go in 2 ways. The first one, it's on the point of industry. Basically, the companies can decide on the level of AI they want to incorporate into their businesses. So it's basically policy at the company level. So then when the fresh graduates comes in, they are upbring through that policy, so they know what level. And then I think at the education sector level also, one thing that we can bring in was teach them how to use AI responsibly. So I think, well, back in times when the calculators were introduced, people were worried that people might forget how to do mathematics, right? But actually it helped people. So I was brought up in a culture until I finished my advanced levels. We were never let to use calculators. I started using calculators when I was in my bachelor's. So for my 3-hour advanced level exam, we were relying on logbooks to finish calculations. So I feel like because we did it in hand, we valued the use of calculators, and we kind of started using it responsibly. And I feel like if we can teach the students how to actually engage with AI responsibly, I think they can build that agency. They know what to do, they know what not to do, so they'll be more fruitful employees at the end. Yeah.
I guess, our students are the ones that have the knowledge. The problem is, and I can talk for cybersecurity at least, is that when they're really needed, especially in times of urgency, when there's been, a breach, which we hear about over and over again, often they don't have the communication skills, and they don't have the empowerment to be able to step up and make those decisions very quickly. So whilst they may have the great technical skills, one of the other things is that organizations need to be able to enable that pathway for that effective communication when they need to draw upon their skills, and also to develop their confidence to be able to speak out about their knowledge as well, and to translate it in a way that people can understand in those situations.
Okay, I think that's everybody. So we've got a question from yeah.
Thank you. I'm just thinking about AI literacy and where Monash stands as a role in the in the Australia-wide, but also in developing countries. Do we have any plan or approach, or is it too early in the process to even think about that?
So this is around AI literacy in Monash and then nationally and internationally? For Monash? I think we're struggling to get AI literacy to our staff and students, but we're pretty big. So if we develop good materials and work out a way to do that internally, then I think that could be valuable for broader sharing. Probably not if we want to try and monetize it, but anyway. Look, it is really tricky. There's 3 hours of AI literacy that's been available to all students and staff for the last 3 months, and I'm on the AI steering committee, and the completion rates, opening it up and getting started aren't great, and the completion rates are even lower. And I'm one of those who opened it up and got started and didn't finish it. And because we haven't made it compulsory trade-off, but I do think that we're going to have to probably bite the bullet and say, well, everyone knows they should do it, but they're not doing it. So maybe we have to tell them they have to. What is tricky is, I mean, you can sort of do this introductory stuff, give background, give some examples, let people play around with it a bit. And, you know, and that, I guess that's sort of what people typically mean by at least introductory literacy. We've also got a new unit called AI for Everyone, where we're offering this semester. And I haven't actually heard how I've heard it's going okay, but, you know, we haven't seen the SETU or the fail rates or all those normal measures of how it's gone. But we have offered that as an elective, in fact, a non-technical elective. It's not supposed to be for IT students unless they happen to want to do it early on or have an easy elective. But so it'll be interesting to see what that take-up is. And so, again, if we do that, I actually think it's a really good idea to make the curricula for that sort of unit sort of out there and hope that everyone picks it up and uses it. I think it's a really good publicity for Monash and shows that we're leading in this area. I think other people are doing that. Microsoft has a lot of introductory stuff now on AI. That's part of their business model, though, to upskill people in AI literacy, including in organisations, and then they use AI in all the Microsoft products to whatever, you know, like that's their business model. I don't know that. And then there's all the models of, you know, Coursera and other kinds of MOOCs and other online learning and all sorts of things. There's also boot camps in AI. So there's the learning landscape is not just formal education through formal institutions, and this is a challenge for our sector, just to keep people wanting to come and pay for the accredited, more what we hope will be more substantial education, rather than the micro-credentials and the MOOCs and the so on. We've been okay through MOOCs now for 20 years, but whether AI and teaching people how to use AI, and then once you've got AI, do you really need a degree? Okay, maybe you don't know how to think properly, but if you can produce as good a code as someone who studied software engineering for 4 years, if you can do a 6 months sort of software plus AI course, well, you might get the same job. So anyway, I'm getting a bit distracted here, but I think that there's things that we're doing, but to be honest, it's a real scramble. I mean, we've still got to do all our business as usual. We've got to teach all our courses, do all our administration, do our research. A lot of people are changing their research, which is as an overhead to adapt to, you know, the changes in their field. So kind of leading on the AI literacy, it's a little bit tricky. Like, it sounds like a really nice idea for us to do, but whether we've got the resources and the will and things, I'm not sure. And I'm finishing in a couple of months, so it won't be me. Okay.
A couple of months.
Less
than a couple of months.
No, 19th of December.
Oh, 19th. All right. Okay. Right.
Not
that we're counting the days.
Not that we're counting the days. Not that I got a countdown app on my phone that I open up occasionally.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Well, look.
Small point. I feel like it's the literacy part is beyond Monash to take measures too. There are like research happening at Monash in terms of like coming up with surveys and tests to measure the AI literacy. So it's published out there. But in terms of what you meant by literacy, it's need to be properly defined. In statistical terms, people know what when you say numeracy means what people say literacy means. And if you go into computer literacy, I just realized the official definition of computer literacy is that people were able to switch on a computer and switch off it. That's called computer literacy. So basically, my point being, there should be ways in official statistics in terms of like, what do you mean by AI literacy, what encompasses there, and having that proper data collection mechanisms in place, then it actually helps to strengthen, to measure things out there.
I'm going to just follow up. I think that's a pretty traditional sort of structuring curriculum and education approach. But I do think when things are moving so fast that you're going to be trying to capture and define a moving target, that I'm not sure that we need to worry so much about that, because I think it's going to change by the time you run a 1-year study and then analyse the data, and in 2 years' time you put out what you say literacies and what the curriculum should be, and it's gone. So that's it. It doesn't mean we don't think about it, but I just think some of our traditional ways of doing that it won't work. And the other thing is that I think about 10 years ago, Finland had a whole idea that the government had that everyone, it's one of the Scandinavian countries, I might be on the wrong one, to get the whole country, aware of AI. And this was pre even ChatGPT, and they sort of had various, free courses through libraries and online, and the equivalent of MOOCs that people could just do for free. The idea then was to get people, as a community, being more aware of AI and how you use it and things. And I have no idea really what happened to that, but it was a big initiative. I think they had about 10 years ago. So I don't think our government has really thought about that. They talk about lifelong learning. I mean, there's nothing for lifelong learning. You can't, if you want to go back to uni, you have to pay master's level fees. It's hard to get, you have to, or you get your employer to pay for it, or you have to take time off. We haven't got free, ongoing, lifelong education, and we haven't got any notion that, things that our kids are learning in schools, or they're digital natives or no. Well, how do we get the other 90% of the population vaguely up on that ladder? We don't have a government or a society that has that notion. So I think that's a really interesting challenge, and maybe we should be advocating that the needs of an AI literate society should get us to, maybe jump ahead a few levels and catch up a little bit on that.
No, I'm going to say the last thing. I promise. Yeah, I get to have the last word. I love it. You've asked a really important question, and I think there was two parts to it. You talk about AI literacy at Monash, and you also talked about AI literacy in more disadvantaged areas, and how can you use one to the other. Not necessarily in AI, but if you look in design as a whole, we designed curbs, with the thing that you could roll down for wheelchairs. But it was really helpful when I had a baby to push around. It's really helpful when my daughter rides her bike. It's really helpful when I push a buggy of shopping home because I've decided to walk and I bought too much. Sometimes when we design for what I'm going to call the extreme case or the difficult case, we actually solve a whole bunch of problems everywhere else. So I guess I would repose the question, should we be focusing on how we upskill at Monash, or should we be finding the barriers in that more challenging case, and in solving that we actually solve a lot of the problems in a more privileged area?
That's really interesting perspective. Yeah. Okay. Look, thank you so much, our panel members. It was a really interesting discussion. Lots of thoughts. I'm still a mixture of terrified, excited. Okay. Well, I think now that's we have lunch at the back, and I'd like to invite everyone to come and have some lunch and network further. And just another thank you to our panel and Barbara.
The organisers in my welcome remarks, and I forgot because I was jumping around between my prepared notes. So I'd like to thank Judy, Barbara, the events team, Lucas and others who, Katie, yeah, okay. So thanks to the people who organised it. These kind of events, they're really fun to come to and be part of, but they don't happen by chance, and we need people to put up their hands and do it. So thank you to organisers.
Thank you.